The stars had always been beautiful to the people of Earth, but on that cold November morning, they became something else entirely. They became a warning. Admiral Grace Thompson stood on the observation deck of the orbital station watching the darkness. Between stars, she had served 30 years in the United Space Defense Force, and she had seen many things, but nothing had prepared her for what was coming. The first signal arrived at exactly 6:14 in the morning, Earth Standard Time. It was not a greeting. It was not a question. It was a demand. Commander David Park rushed onto the deck, holding a tablet in his shaking hands. "Admiral, we are receiving a transmission from beyond the asteroid belt. It is on all frequencies." Grace took the tablet and watched the message play. The screen showed ships, hundreds of them, thousands of them. Ships so large, they made the moon look small. Ships black as the void itself, moving toward Earth with terrible purpose. The message was simple: we are the Dominion. We have ruled this galaxy for 12,000 years. We have broken 1,000 worlds. We have ended 90 species. Your world belongs to us now. Surrender and you will serve. Resist and you will burn. Grace watched the message 3 times. Her face showed nothing, but inside her mind was racing. She had read the old reports, the classified files that spoke of signals from deep space, signals that suggested humanity was not alone. Now she knew the truth: humanity was not alone, and whatever was out there was hungry. "Get me a line to Geneva," she said. Her voice was calm like the surface of a frozen lake. "Command needs to see this." Within hours, the world knew. Everything changed in those hours. The old arguments stopped. The old borders meant nothing. The old enemies looked at each other and realized they were all facing the same end. In Seoul, Dr. Robert Kim sat in his small apartment watching the news. He was 73 years old, and he had spent his entire life studying physics. He had theories about energy shields and faster-than-light travel, theories that his colleagues had called impossible. Now he picked up his phone and called a number he had not dialed in 20 years. In Houston, Linda Morris pulled a dusty box from her closet. Inside were files marked classified, files from a project that had been shut down 30 years ago, a project about weapons that could crack moons. She had kept the files because she believed someone might need them someday. That someday had arrived in Geneva. The United Nations Security Council met. The room was full of people who had spent their careers disagreeing. Now they sat in silence watching the alien transmission play on the big screen. The American representative spoke first. "We need to respond." The Chinese representative nodded. "For once we agree." The Russian representative looked around the room. "We have 72 hours before they reach weapons range. 72 hours to do what no generation before us has done." "What is that?" asked the British representative. "Unite," said the Russian. "Every nation, every military, every resource. One command, one purpose." It was impossible. Everyone knew it was impossible. Humanity had never united for anything. Nations fought over land and oil and pride. They did not come together. They did not trust each other. But the ships kept coming closer every hour, larger every hour, more terrible every hour, and something changed. One by one, the representatives voted. They voted to create a unified command. They voted to share their weapons and their soldiers and their secrets. They voted to put aside 10,000 years of conflict because the alternative was extinction. Admiral Grace Thompson received the notification at midnight. She read it twice to make sure she understood. She had been chosen to lead the unified fleet. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon, all of it under her command. David stood beside her, reading over her shoulder. "This is unprecedented," he said. Grace nodded. "Yes, it is. Are you ready for this?" She looked out the window at the distant stars, where death was approaching. "No," she said. "But that does not matter." "Does it?" David smiled. "Despite everything, no, Admiral, I suppose it does not." The next morning, Grace addressed the unified fleet. Her words were broadcast to every ship in orbit around Earth and to every base on the ground, and to every television and radio on the planet. I am Admiral Grace Thompson. She began. I have been given command of our defense. I did not ask for this honor, and I will not pretend to deserve it. But I will tell you this. She paused, looking at the camera. Those ships out there carry creatures who have conquered 1,000 worlds. They believe we will break like the others did. They believe we will kneel. They believe we are weak. Another pause. They are wrong. Across the world, people stopped what they were doing. They stopped driving and working and fighting. They stood still and listened. We are not weak, she continued. We are the species that survived ice ages and plagues and wars that killed millions. We are the species that split the atom and walked on the moon. We are the species that looks at impossible odds and says, try me in a coffee shop in New York. An old veteran wiped tears from his eyes. In a factory in Germany, workers stood together watching the screen. In a hospital in Tokyo, doctors and patients held hands. They want us to be afraid, Grace said, and maybe we are, but fear does not make us weak. Fear makes us dangerous. We do not surrender. We do not kneel. We fight. She leaned forward to the beings in those ships. I have one message. You made a mistake coming here. You should have stayed in the dark where you belonged, because now you have our attention, and we take things like this very personally. The transmission ended. The world was silent for one long moment. Then the cheering started. Dr. Robert Kim was already on a plane to Geneva. His theories about shields were no longer impossible. They were necessary. Linda Morris was in a military convoy heading to a secure facility. Her old files were now the most important documents on Earth. Around the globe, scientists and soldiers and engineers who had never met began working together. They shared data across borders that had been closed for decades. They solved problems that had seemed unsolvable because failure meant death. The Dominion ships grew closer. Their shadow fell across the outer planets Jupiter, then Mars, then the asteroid belt. Each day they sent new transmissions, demands for surrender, threats of destruction, images of worlds they had burned, and each day humanity worked faster. Grace stood on the bridge of her flagship, the USS Defiance, watching. The enemy approached. David stood beside her. As always, they will be in weapons range in 6 hours, he reported. Grace nodded. How many ships do we have? 57 combat ready. Another 30 that can fly, but might not survive a fight against 300 of theirs. Yes, Admiral, against 300. Grace was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled. Good, she said. David stared at her. Good, Admiral. Did you say good? I did. Those ships have conquered 1,000 worlds. They have never lost. They have never even been challenged. And now they face us. 57 ships crewed by people who know they might die, but refuse to run. She turned to face him. That is not a disadvantage, David. That is our greatest weapon. They do not know what we are capable of because we do not know what we are capable of. We have never been pushed this hard. We have never been united like this. She looked back at the stars. They are about to find out what happens when you push humanity to the edge. They are about to learn why the universe should have left us alone. David nodded slowly. Then let us teach them. Grace sat in her command chair and opened a channel to the fleet. All ships, she said. This is Admiral Thompson. Prepare for combat. Across the fleet, men and women checked their weapons and said goodbye to loved ones and made peace with their gods. And then they turned their ships toward the darkness and waited for the enemy to come. The Shadow Fleet was here, and humanity was ready. The Dominion had a name for the moment before battle. They called it the Silence. It was the moment when enemy ships went quiet, when their crews realized they were about to die, when hope left them completely. The Dominion had seen this silence 1,000 times across 1,000 worlds. But as their fleet approached Earth, they heard something else. They heard music, Admiral. Grace Thompson had ordered every ship in the human fleet to broadcast on open frequencies. The song was old and defiant, and it echoed across the void between worlds. The Dominion commanders listened in confusion. They had never heard anything like it. "What are they doing?" asked the Dominion's Supreme Commander, a towering figure called the Hierarch. He stood on the bridge of his flagship, surrounded by officers who had served him for centuries. One of his advisors checked the sensors. "They are broadcasting audio. Hierarch music of some kind." Music. The Hierarch made a sound that might have been laughter. "They face destruction. And they sing perhaps. They have gone mad with fear perhaps." The Hierarch dismissed the thought. "They are primitives. They know nothing of war. Show them what real power looks like." The Dominion fleet opened fire. Grace watched the first volley approach. On her tactical display, thousands of energy beams cutting through space toward her ships. She had studied the Dominion weapons for weeks. She knew what they could do. All ships, evasive pattern Delta. She commanded scatter and regroup at rally point 7. The human fleet broke formation like a flock of birds startled by a predator. Ships dove and rolled and twisted in patterns that seemed random but were carefully planned. The Dominion weapons were powerful, but they were designed to hit enemies who moved in straight lines. Enemies who were predictable. Humans were not predictable. The first volley missed most of its targets. Only 3 human ships were hit, and 2 of those survived with damage. The Dominion commanders stared at their screens. In disbelief, they dodged. One said, "How did they dodge? We do not know." Hierarch. "Their movements follow no logical pattern." The Hierarch leaned forward. "Then calculate the pattern." "We cannot. It appears to be random." "Nothing is random. Recalculate." But the truth was something the Dominion had never encountered. Human tactics were not random. They were creative. And creativity could not be predicted by any computer. On the bridge of the Defiance, David pulled up the shield analysis. Dr. Kim had sent the data an hour before the battle, and the engineering teams had worked through the night to implement his findings. "Admiral, we have the shield frequencies. They rotate on a predictable cycle every 47 seconds. There is a gap." "How big a gap?" "Small. Maybe 2 seconds. But if we time our weapons right, do it." "Grace," said David, nodded, and transmitted the data to the fleet. Within minutes, human ships began timing their attacks, hitting Dominion shields at the exact moment they flickered. The effect was devastating. Shields that had never failed began to fall. Ships that had never been damaged began to burn on the Hierarch. Flagship alarms sounded for the first time in centuries. "How is this possible?" the Hierarch demanded. "Our shields are impenetrable. They appear to have found a weakness." "Hierarch, the timing suggests they understand our technology. That is impossible. They are primitives. They have had space travel for less than 200 years, and yet they are killing our ships." The battle raged for hours. Human ships were destroyed, but they took Dominion vessels with them. Every time a human ship fell, its crew fought until the last moment. Some rammed their ships into enemies. Some overloaded their reactors to create explosions that damaged nearby targets. None surrendered. Lieutenant Kevin Wright commanded a small destroyer called the Relentless. His ship had been hit early in the battle and was leaking atmosphere. Half his crew was dead. The ship could barely maneuver. Lieutenant, one of his officers, said, "We have lost main power. Weapons are offline. We should evacuate." Kevin looked at his screens. The Hierarch flagship was nearby. Its shields were damaged from earlier attacks. There was a gap in its defenses. A small gap, but enough. "No," he said. "Set course for the flagship. Maximum speed, sir. That will kill you." "No," Kevin said, "but it will kill them too." "Open the channel to the Admiral." "Admiral Thompson, this is Lieutenant Wright. Relentless is combat ineffective. I'm going to make our death count." Grace heard the message and understood immediately. "Lieutenant," she said, "it has been an honor." "The honor is mine." "Admiral, tell my mother I am sorry about the car. She will understand." The Relentless accelerated toward the Hierarch flagship. The Dominion tried to stop it, but the small ship was moving too fast. The damaged shields flickered, and the Relentless passed through. Kevin Wright closed his eyes and thought of home. He thought of his mother and his friends and the girl he had never told he loved, and then he pressed the button that overloaded his reactor. The explosion tore through the HFY flagship. The bridge was destroyed instantly. The HFY and his entire command staff died in fire. 12,000 years of conquest ended in a single moment of human spite. Across the fleet, Dominion ships faltered. Their command structure was gone. Their leader was dead. For the first time in their long history, they did not know what to do. Grace saw the opportunity. Attack. She ordered. All ships full assault. The human fleet surged forward, no longer defensive. Now they were hunters. They chased down damaged Dominion ships. They exploited every weakness. They fought with a fury that shocked their enemies. By the time the battle ended, humanity had lost 38 ships. The Dominion had lost 93, including their flagship. David stared at the numbers. "We won," he said. His voice was filled with disbelief. "We actually won." Grace nodded, but she did not celebrate. She looked at the list of destroyed ships. 38 ships, thousands of lives, Lieutenant Wright and his crew, and so many others. "We won this battle," she said, "but the war is not over. They will send more ships, more weapons. They will not stop until we are destroyed, or they are. Then we destroy them," David said. Grace looked at him and saw something in his eyes. Something hard and cold and determined. She saw the same thing in herself. "Yes," she said. "We do." The message went out to Earth. Victory. The word spread like fire through dry grass. People who had been waiting in terror now celebrated in the streets. They cheered and cried and held each other. And they remembered the names of those who had died. Lieutenant Kevin Wright became a legend. His last words were repeated everywhere. "Tell my mother I am sorry about the car." It was a strange thing to say before dying, but somehow that made it more human, more real. Dr. Robert Kim watched the celebration from his laboratory. He did not join in. He was already working on the next problem. The Dominion would return. They would be angry. They would be prepared, and humanity needed to be ready. Linda Morris stood in a weapons facility looking at blueprints for devices that could crack planets. She had hoped these plans would never be needed. Now she began to build across the galaxy. Other species watched the battle footage in secret. Places where the Dominion had ruled for millennia saw something they had never seen before. They saw the Dominion lose. They saw the mighty fall. They saw hope. One of them, a creature from a species nearly destroyed by the Dominion 3 centuries ago, watched the footage of Lieutenant Wright flying his ship into the enemy flagship. "Why?" she asked her companion. Why would he do that? He could have escaped. Her companion thought for a long moment, because he knew he was going to die anyway. And he decided that if he had to die, he would take his enemies with him. That is insane. No, her companion said. That is human. First species to contact humanity arrived 3 weeks later. They came in a damaged ship held together with desperate repairs. They came with intelligence about the Dominion and star charts and knowledge of weaknesses, and they came with something else, something the Dominion had tried to destroy across 1,000 worlds. They came with hope. The new Dominion Supreme Commander was called the Voice. She had earned her name through centuries of breaking rebellions. She did not use weapons first. She used words. She used fear. She found what her enemies loved, and she destroyed it slowly until they begged to surrender. The Voice studied the battle reports from Earth with cold interest. The Hierarch had been arrogant. He had attacked directly, expecting easy victory. He had not understood what he was facing. The Voice understood these humans. She told her council, they did not fight like rational beings. They sacrifice themselves. They attack when they should retreat. They laugh in the face of death. Then they are insane. Said one of her advisors. No, the Voice said. They are something worse. They are motivated. We cannot defeat motivation with weapons. We must defeat it with fear. She outlined her new strategy. The Dominion would not attack the human fleet directly. Instead, they would attack everything else. They would target cities and hospitals and schools. They would destroy food supplies and water treatment plants. They would make the humans suffer until their will broke. This Is how we have always won, she explained. We do not kill our enemies. We make them wish they were dead. And then they surrender. The attacks began within days in Tokyo. A Dominion strike force destroyed 3 hospitals in a single night. Thousands died. The survivors were left without medicine, without hope. The Dominion broadcast images of the destruction to every screen on Earth. This is your future. The voice said, surrender now and the pain stops. Resist, and there will be no end to your suffering in London. A water treatment plant was destroyed. Millions were left without clean water. Disease began to spread. The Dominion did not help. They watched, they waited in New York. The power grid was attacked. The city went dark, fires broke out, chaos followed. And still the Dominion watched. The voice expected despair. She expected riots. She expected the human leaders to come begging for peace. What she got was Dr. Michelle Davis. Michelle was a psychologist who had spent her career studying human behavior under stress. She had worked with soldiers and disaster survivors and prisoners of war. She knew things about the human mind that few others understood. The unified command brought her in after the 3rd week of attacks. They needed to understand what was happening. They needed to know if humanity would break. Michelle stood before the council of generals and admirals and world leaders. She was small and quiet, and she did not look like someone who could save the world. But when she spoke, everyone listened. You want to know if we will break, she said. I can tell you the answer. We will not, General. James Miller leaned forward. How can you be sure? Because I understand what the Dominion does not, Michelle replied. They are using terror tactics. Fear, violence, destruction of hope. These tactics work on most species. They work on species that have something to lose. Species that value survival above all else. She paused. Humans are different. We do not value survival above all else. We value meaning. We value purpose. We value spite. Admiral Grace Thompson asked. Michelle nodded. When someone tries to terrorize a human, something strange happens. We do not collapse. We get angry. We get creative. We find ways to fight back, not because we think we will win, but because we refuse to let our enemies have the satisfaction of seeing us give up. She brought up historical data on the screen. Look at our history. The London Blitz lasted 8 months. German bombers destroyed entire neighborhoods, killed thousands of civilians. Did Britain surrender? No, they became more determined. The attacks made them angry, and anger made them strong. She showed another image. Pearl Harbor. Japan attacked America and killed thousands. Did America collapse? No. The attack unified a divided nation. It turned fear into fury. Within 4 years, Japan was defeated. The voice thinks she understands terror, but she does not understand human terror. Human terror does not make us weak. It makes us dangerous. General Miller nodded slowly. So what do we do? Let the anger spread. Michelle said, we channel it. We give people ways to fight back. Not just soldiers. Everyone, civilians, engineers, teachers, farmers. Everyone becomes part of the war effort. That is exactly what happened in occupied territories. Humans began to resist. They did not have weapons at first, so they made them. A chemistry teacher in Paris mixed household chemicals into explosives. A mechanic in Berlin sabotaged Dominion vehicles. A farmer in Kansas discovered that certain crops could be modified to poison Dominion food supplies. Thomas Lee was an accountant from Chicago. He had never held a weapon in his life. He wore glasses and worried about his taxes and went to bed early every night when the Dominion occupied his city. Thomas did not flee. He stayed. He watched. He learned. And one night, he walked into a Dominion supply depot with a backpack full of fertilizer and a laptop computer. The explosion destroyed 3 months of supplies. The Dominion never found out who did it. Thomas went back to his apartment and went to bed early as always. He kept a journal. His entry that night was simple. They burned my city. They killed my neighbors. I burned their supplies. We are even for today. Tomorrow we start again. Stories like this spread across the world. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Not because they were brave, but because they were angry. Not because they hoped to win, but because they refused to lose without. Fighting the voice watched the reports in growing frustration. They should be breaking. She said, the terror should be working. Why is it not working? One of her advisors offered a theory. Perhaps their psychology is different. Perhaps fear affects them in ways we do not expect. The voice considered this. She ordered her scientists to study human prisoners to understand their minds. What they found disturbed her deeply. Humans, she read in the final report, have a unique neurological response to extreme stress. Unlike other species, they do not simply experience fear and submission. They experience a cascade of hormones that increases aggression and creativity. Terror makes them more dangerous, not less. The report concluded with a warning. These beings should not be terrorized. They should be destroyed quickly and completely. Any attempt to break their will slowly will only strengthen their resolve. The voice threw the report across the room. She had made a mistake. The same mistake the hierarch had made. She had underestimated humans. Not their technology, not their weapons, their spirit on Earth. The resistance grew stronger every day. Michelle Davis became a symbol. People called her the voice of humanity. A small, quiet woman who had explained why they would never surrender. She gave speeches on underground broadcasts. They want us to be afraid, she said, and we are terrified. But here's the secret. They do not understand. Being afraid does not mean we stop fighting. Being afraid means we fight harder because we know what we are fighting for. She looked into the camera. They took our cities. We will take them back. They killed our families. We will remember them. They tried to break us. We will break them instead, not because we are stronger, not because we are smarter, but because we are human, and humans do not know when to quit in occupied Paris. A little girl drew a picture of a human soldier standing over a fallen Dominion warrior. She showed it to her mother. Will we win? She asked her. Mother looked at the picture. Then she looked at her daughter. Yes, she said, we will win, because we are too stubborn to lose. The picture was copied and shared. It appeared on walls across the planet, a simple drawing by a child, a symbol of defiance. The Dominion had tried to terrify humanity. Humanity had taken it personally, and now the universe would learn what that meant. The first ship arrived without warning. It was small and damaged, and it barely made it through the asteroid belt before its engines failed. Human patrol vessels surrounded it immediately, weapons ready for a trap. But what emerged from the ship was not a threat. It was a survivor. The creature was thin and fragile with pale skin that seemed almost transparent. It moved slowly, as if every step caused pain. It wore a device around its neck that translated its words into human language. I am called. Hope said, the creature that is not my birth name. My birth name was taken from me 300 years ago when the Dominion destroyed my world. Hope is what I call myself now, because hope is what you have given me. Admiral Grace Thompson met the visitor on the orbital station. She had never seen an alien before. None of them had. But she treated Hope with the same respect she would give any ambassador. You said we gave you hope, Grace said. How Hope moved to the window and looked out at Earth. The blue and green planet floating in darkness. I watched your battle. She said, I watched from a hidden place where my people have lived since the Dominion broke us. We hide because we believed resistance was impossible. We believed the Dominion could not be defeated. She turned back to Grace. Then we saw your ships attack 300 Dominion vessels against 50 of yours. The odds were impossible, but you attacked anyway, and you won. Grace nodded. We lost many good people that day. Yes, you did. And that is what changed everything. You knew you would lose people. You knew the cost would be terrible. And you fought anyway. Hope stepped closer. You understand what that means to species like mine, to the hundreds of species the Dominion has conquered. We have spent centuries believing that resistance meant death. Now we know something else. Resistance means sacrifice. But it does not mean defeat. Over the next weeks, more ships arrived. The second was piloted by creatures that looked like walking trees. Their world had been burned by the Dominion 500 years ago, but some had escaped. They had lived on asteroids and moons waiting for something to change. The third came from a species that had served the Dominion as slaves for 1,000 years. They had stolen a ship and fled. They brought information about Dominion supply routes and communication codes. The fourth and fifth and sixth. They kept coming, refugees and survivors and escaped prisoners, all of them drawn by the same thing. The knowledge that someone was finally fighting back. Dr. William Brown was appointed to coordinate with the new arrivals. He had been a professor of languages before the war. Now he spent his days learning to communicate with beings from 100 different worlds. They are not powerful, he reported to the command council. Most of them are broken peoples, survivors of genocide, victims of slavery, refugees with nothing but the ships they arrived. And then what good are they? Asked General Miller. We need weapons and soldiers, not more mouths to feed. William shook his head. You do not understand. They may not have weapons, but they have something more valuable. They have knowledge. He brought up a display. This species was conquered 600 years ago. They remember how the Dominion attacks, how their commanders think, what their weaknesses are. This species worked in Dominion shipyards for 3 centuries. They know how to build their ships and how to destroy them. This species served in Dominion intelligence. They know secrets that could change the war. General Miller was silent for a moment. Then he nodded. Very well. Let us hear what they have to say. What they had to say changed everything. The Dominion was not as strong as it appeared. From the outside, it looked invincible. 12,000 years of conquest, millions of ships, billions of soldiers. But inside, it was rotting. Enslaved species hated their masters. They did the minimum work necessary to avoid punishment, but no more. They sabotaged equipment when they could. They shared information with resistance networks. They waited for an opportunity. That opportunity had arrived. Hope stood before the Human Command Council with representatives from 37 other species. Behind her, we are the broken, she said. We are the conquered and the enslaved and the nearly destroyed, but we are still here. And we want to help. What can you offer? Asked Grace. Everything. Hope said, we know the Dominion. We know their worlds and their fleets and their leaders. We know where they are strong and where they are weak. We know which species will fight for them and which will turn against them if given the chance. She paused. We cannot win this war for you. We are too damaged, too few, too weak, but we can help you win it. We can be your eyes and your ears in places your ships cannot go. We can spread the word of your resistance to every corner of the galaxy. We can turn the Dominion Empire against itself. Grace looked at the gathered aliens, beings from dozens of different worlds, all of them damaged by the same enemy, all of them hoping for the same thing. We accept, she said. Welcome to the coalition. The name stuck. The Coalition of the Broken. It was not a name that inspired confidence, but it was honest, and sometimes honesty mattered more than inspiration. Over the following months, the coalition grew. Intelligence flowed in from 1,000 sources. Dominion plans were leaked before they could be executed. Supply lines were sabotaged. Slaves revolted on factory worlds. Communication networks were disrupted. The Voice watched her empire begin to crack. This is impossible, she said. They are primitives. They have been in space for 2 centuries. How are they doing this? It is not just the humans, said one of her advisors. It is everyone. They have united the broken. The broken cannot threaten us. They are weak. They were weak alone, said the advisor. Together they are strong. The Voice stared at the reports. Species she had never worried about were now causing problems everywhere. Escaped slaves were fighting back. Conquered worlds were refusing orders. The fear that had held the Dominion together for 12,000 years was beginning to fade. She made a decision. If we cannot defeat them one by one, she said, we will defeat them all at once. Gather every ship, every weapon, everything we have. We will go to their homeworld and we will burn it. And when they see what we do to Earth, every other species will remember why they fear us." The Dominion fleet began to gather. The largest fleet ever assembled ships from every corner of the Empire, converging on one target on Earth. Grace received the intelligence from Coalition spies. "They are coming," she told the Council. "Everything they have, every ship, every soldier, every weapon." "How many?" asked David. "Thousands. 10,000, maybe more." David was silent. The human fleet had grown, but it was still small compared to the Dominion. They had OIs now, but most of them had no warship scan. "We win," he finally asked. Grace thought of Hope and the other refugees. She thought of the millions of beings across the galaxy who were watching, waiting, hoping. She thought of Lieutenant Wright, flying his ship into the enemy flagship. "I do not know," she said, "but we are going to try." She stood up. "Send word to every Coalition world. Every ship that can fight needs to be here. Every being who wants to see the Dominion fall needs to know that this is the moment. This is when we decide the future." David nodded. "What about the people who cannot fight?" "They have the most important job of all," Grace said. "They need to believe. They need to hope. Because if we fall, hope dies with us, and that cannot happen." The message went out across the galaxy to hidden colonies and refugee ships and enslaved worlds. "The humans are making their stand. Will you stand with them?" The answers came back one by one. Yes, yes, yes. 100 times yes. The coalition of the broken was going to war, and broken or not, they intended to win. The Dominion called their capital the Eternal Throne. It was a system of 12 worlds, each one a monument to their power. Cities of black stone stretched across continents. Shipyards hung in orbit, producing weapons that could crack moons. For 12,000 years, no enemy had ever come close to this place. Until now, Admiral Grace Thompson stood on the bridge of the Defiance, looking at the tactical display. The Dominion fleet was enormous. Thousands of ships arranged in formations that had never been broken, weapons that had burned 100 civilizations pointed at her fleet. Beside her stood Commander David Park and representatives from 11 different coalition species, including Hope, who had refused to stay behind. "How many do we have?" Grace asked. David checked the numbers. 300 combat ships, human and coalition combined. Another 500 support vessels against 8,000 Dominion warships. Grace nodded. "The odds are better than Jupiter." David almost laughed at Jupiter. "We had 50 ships against 300, and we won," Grace said, "because they expected us to fight like them. They expected us to be rational. They were wrong." She turned to face her bridge crew, humans and aliens working side by side. "They are going to expect us to fight like them again, and we are going to disappoint them again." The plan was simple in concept and insane in execution. The coalition fleet would engage the Dominion, directly drawing their attention and their fire. Meanwhile, a small strike team would slip through the chaos and reach the voice command center. They would not carry weapons. They would carry something more dangerous. Dr. Robert Kim had worked with coalition scientists for months on the project. A virus, not one that destroyed systems, but one that revealed truth. The Dominion had ruled through fear, but also through lies. They had told their subjects that resistance was impossible, that every rebellion had failed, that no species had ever stood against them, and survived. All of it was false. The virus would access Dominion archives and broadcast their contents to every world in their empire. Every atrocity they had hidden, every rebellion they had crushed, every species they had destroyed. The truth about 12,000 years of conquest. The Dominion rules because their subjects believe they cannot be beaten. Dr. Robert had explained, if we show them the truth, the belief dies. And without belief, the Empire dies. Captain Angela White would lead the strike team. She had lost her family in the first Dominion attack on Earth. She had nothing left to lose and everything to gain. "Are you ready?" Grace asked her before the battle. Angela nodded. "I have been ready since the day they killed my parents." Grace put a hand on her shoulder. What you are doing may save billions of lives, or it may fail, Angela said. Either way, I am going to try. That is all any of us can do. The battle began at dawn. Earth time. The Dominion fleet advanced in perfect formation. Their weapons charged, their shields powered. The voice watched from her command center, certain of victory. She had 8,000 ships against 300. The outcome was inevitable. Then, the coalition fleet did something unexpected. They charged, not in formation. Not with any strategy that Dominion computers could predict. They scattered like a swarm of insects. Each ship moving independently, each crew making their own decisions, each one willing to die if it meant taking enemies with them. The voice stared at her tactical display. What are they doing? They are attacking, a Dominion officer said. Obviously, but their formation makes no sense. How do we target them? We cannot predict their movements. They are too random, then destroy them all. Fire everything. The Dominion weapons fired. Thousands of beams and missiles and projectiles filling space with destruction. Coalition ships died by the dozens, but for every ship that fell, 2 more slipped through, hitting Dominion vessels in unexpected places, exploiting weaknesses that should have been protected. Human pilots flew like they had nothing to fear, because they had accepted that they might die. Alien crews fought beside them, united by something stronger than fear. In the chaos, Angela and her team made their ship was small and fast, and painted with materials that made it nearly invisible to sensors. They dove through the battle, weaving between explosions and debris. Heading straight for the voice command center, we are detected, Angela reported. 3 ships moving to intercept. Grace heard the message. Can you make it? Maybe, Angela said. Probably not. But we are going to try anyway. She pushed her engines to maximum. The ship screamed through space faster than it was designed to go behind. The Dominion interceptors closed in on the Defiance. Hope watched the tactical display. They will not make it, she said. The interceptors are too fast. David looked at Grace. Admiral, we could send support ships, but it would weaken our line. Grace made her decision. Do it. This is what we are fighting for. 3 human destroyers broke formation and raced toward Angela's position. They would not arrive in time to stop the interceptors, but they might slow them down. The first destroyer reached the interceptors and opened fire. It lasted 12 seconds before being destroyed, but those 12 seconds changed the geometry of the chase. The second destroyer arrived and did the same. 9 seconds this time. Enough time for Angela to gain distance. The third destroyer was commanded by a young lieutenant named Steve Cooper. He was 23 years old. He had joined the fleet 6 months ago. He had never expected to die today. His ship was damaged from earlier combat. His weapons were nearly depleted. He knew he could not stop the interceptors, but he could slow them down. He opened a channel to Angela. Captain White, you are almost there. Do not stop. Then he turned his ship directly into the path of the interceptors and fired everything he had. The explosion blinded sensors for 3 seconds. When they cleared, Angela was gone. Her ship had reached the voice command center and Doc Steve Cooper died. He died so that Angela could complete her mission. He died so that billions might live. He was 23 years old, and he never got to see if his sacrifice mattered. Inside the voice command center, Angela and her team moved fast. They had minutes before Dominion security found them, minutes to access the archives and upload the virus. They reached the central computer. Angela plugged in the device Robert Kim had built. The screen filled with data, 12,000 years of secrets beginning to spill out. The virus spread across Dominion networks. Within minutes, it reached the first colony worlds. Within hours, it reached the far edges of the Empire. And beings who had served the Dominion for centuries suddenly saw the truth. They saw that the Dominion had lied. They saw that rebellions had happened. They saw that species had fought back. They saw that the mighty could fall. 100 world slaves stopped working. On 1,000 ships, crews refused orders. On 1,000,000 colonies, beings who had been afraid their entire lives felt something new. They felt hope. The voice watched her empire crumble. No, she said. No, this cannot be happening. Her fleet was in chaos. Ships that had been loyal for centuries were refusing to fight. Crews were turning on their commanders. The formations that had never been broken were breaking. Admiral Grace Thompson saw the moment and seized it all. Ships attack. She commanded everything we have. The coalition fleet surged forward, no longer outnumbered, because half the Dominion fleet was no longer fighting. The battle became a rout. Dominion ships surrendered, or fled, or were destroyed. Angela's message came through the chaos. Admiral Levirus is fully deployed. Mission complete. Can you get out? Grace asked. No, Angela said. But it does not matter. Tell them what we did. Tell them we won. The voice command center was destroyed. Moments later, Dominion security finally broke through, and Angela and her team died fighting, but their mission was complete. Voice escaped in a shuttle, fleeing into the darkness. She would never rule again. She would never give orders again. She would spend the rest of her life hiding from the beings she had once enslaved. The battle ended. The Dominion fleet was scattered. Most of their ships had surrendered or been destroyed. Those that remained fled to unknown regions of space. Grace stood on the bridge of the Defiance, surrounded by her crew. She looked at the stars that were no longer symbols of threat, but of possibility. We won, David said. We actually won. Grace nodded. We won because they underestimated us. They thought terror would break us. Instead, it united us. They thought we were weak. Instead, they made us strong. She thought of Lieutenant Wright and Steve Cooper and Angela White and all the others who had given everything. They took our fear and we turned it into fury. They tried to make us kneel, and we refused. They thought they knew what humans were capable of. She smiled, despite her grief. They had no idea. The war was over, but the work was not. A new galactic council formed, built on principles of cooperation and respect. Species that had been enemies for millennia learned to work together. The Dominion Empire became the coalition of worlds. Dr. Michelle Davis gave the opening speech at the first council assembly. We are all here because one empire thought terror was the answer, she said. They were wrong. Terror does not break people in the long run. It teaches them what they are capable of when they have nothing left to lose. She looked at the representatives from 100 different worlds. Humanity did not defeat the Dominion because we were stronger or smarter. We won because we refused. We won because when they tried to make us afraid, we took it personally. The chamber was silent. That stubbornness, that spite, it is not unique to us. Every species here has it somewhere inside them, the will to survive, the refusal to surrender. We just reminded you it was there.